right, I'm going to call the June 14th, 2022 meeting of the Ad Hoc Parking Committee to order. The first item of business is to approve the May 24th, 2022 minutes. And thanks, Bob. All in favor of approving the minutes from our last meeting?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Discussion on parking items. The first one is the Park Mobile implementation update. I think you guys have an exciting update for us.
Yeah, I think so. So I'm happy to announce that as of last Friday, June 10th, Park Mobile was live in the borough. So borough residents can now, take advantage of that. Bit more information. We have stuff on the weekly email. There are also little wallet cards that Park Mobile gave us to hand out to people. So we'll put those out in the office for people who stop by. And otherwise, yeah, if you now want to pay with credit card for parking, you can now do that. Cool.
Something occurs to me about the little wall cards. Could they, I have no idea, like at the Arts and Music Fest, is there some kind of place where those could be put? And I don't know that if there is. I mean, at the Dickens Fest, I know there's some kind of information booth that tells you how Dickens Fest works, and so you could put something like that there if they were okay with it, because it kind of goes, it's an acronym for what they're doing.
We can ask the Music Fest organizers about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, that if there's any other events down there that would be a natural fit for something like that, just so that people have more awareness. Although I have to say, if you're walking around down there, if you've ever walked around down there, the Park Mobile signs jump out at you because you're like, oh, that's new. They're distinctive enough looking. You don't just kind of see them as another, parking regulation sign or whatever. So,
But I do know that Public Works has stickers as well. They're going to be putting on the actual meter too. Yeah.
good. Oh, yeah. That'll really direct people to the park. Oh, that you've got another option.
Exactly.
Wonderful. This is so exciting. And I know this is something that people have asked for a number of years. So thank you for getting this implemented.
And I don't necessarily think, it's up to you whether it really needs to be an agenda item or not, but something I definitely want to do out of my own curiosity is, maybe once a month or so, keep an eye on how the usage statistics look, and if we need to adjust pricing or anything like that. If there's anything really notable about it, I'm certainly happy to share that with the committee.
I think that would be really great to at least know usage after the first couple months or whatever, or if you just see a ton of usage in the first month, I'd love to hear that, because we do wonder, we always wonder how are people using something that we put into place. So, that'd be cool. So we maybe monthly have some kind of update for that.
Yeah, I can just, if you can just remind me whenever, when we're prepping like meeting materials and stuff, and I can prepare. It's like a 30-second report to generate. So.
That's nice. Okay, super. I made a note. Okay, anything else on Park Mobile? Okay. The next item on the agenda is the parking meter update, and when we talked about this the last time, we talked about the possibility of, as we switch over the mechanical meters to digital, should we be getting digital ones that have the free 10-minute button on them, and we needed to understand the pricing before we could make a recommendation.
Yeah, let's see here. So I asked the Public Works manager about that, and I know he had verbally mentioned a price to me, and I'd asked if he could get it an actual written quote for us to look at. I do know I don't want to put a number out there if I'm not 100% sure if it's the number he told me. So I will follow up on that, and I would expect in 2 weeks to have an actual, hopefully in 2 weeks, we'll have an actual written number.
Okay.
Or if I just get an email from him with the number.
Yeah.
I'll get something in writing on that for you.
Okay, great. super. I'm sure they would be happy to be able to move ahead and start replacing some of those really old meters. I'm always amazed when they work still. It's like, wow. Well, they've been around a long time, and I know they've had to be repaired a lot, so it's not like they haven't been opened up and worked on. So yeah, the fact that they're still working is pretty amazing. Okay, the next item is the municipal lot parking and towing ordinance. That's going to be considered for adoption at our Thursday night business meeting, council business meeting. If council does adopt this ordinance, then the next steps would be for the police directives to be updated a little bit. There were just some things that were changed that would need to be done there. And then for the office staff to develop a recommendation for permitting at the 100 Conway lot and the 201 State Line lot, right? And I don't think there's any other next steps from that, is there?
No, so if council does pass ordinance on Thursday at, the next parking committee meeting, I'll write up, some thoughts on that for the, committee to take a look at before they get implemented.
Okay. Great. All right. So the next item then is to favorite topic, residential parking, which we've been having a lot of conversations about. And when I was preparing for today's meeting, I realized that I had to go back and rewatch our last meeting to make sure I really, because I kept stumbling across little things where I was like, wait, what did we decide about that? Because it's just, there's just so many little ins and outs. So I wanted to restate what I think we decided and make sure that we're all in agreement on that. So we talked about whether we wanted to overlay the 3 zones. I'm going to use zones for the moment because we haven't settled on a definite different terminology. Well, we talked about that, but we said there might be other synonyms to consider. So, I mean, I can use neighborhoods for the moment, but if we
That'd be great.
if we find something else different, we can. I don't want us to feel like, oh, if we find a better word, we can't change. I have to say, I forgot to pull out my.
I think we decided zone was not a good word.
Yeah,
Let's use some other word.
Okay.
I don't care if you use neighborhood or just don't use zone.
Okay, all right. So that we would take the 3 areas that Nelson Nygaard proposed, adopt them as neighborhoods, overlay them on our existing, overlay them on top of the existing 2-hour zone places, not make any changes to those, except we talked about changing the enforcement to 24/7. And most of the time we were talking, when I look back when we were talking about it, it was in neighborhood 2. But we also, I could tell we kind of like slid past that though, without definitely saying, oh, it's definitely just there. And so I just wanted to make sure that that is really, what we had decided.
Sorry, I didn't follow your thought.
So we've got this says zone on it, but it's neighborhoods, the 3 areas. And we had talked about changing the enforcement hours to be 24/7 for streets that have 2-hour zone permit, that have any parking permitting on them, which right now is just 2-hour zones. We don't have any other type of parking permit in the borough. But when we were talking about that, we were talking about it kind of generically, and then at some point talked about, doing it in neighborhood 2. But I don't know that we definitely decided we want to have different regulations in those 3 neighborhoods. And that's what I wanted to make sure that and then I also want to say, well, then what would the enforcement hours be in neighborhood 1 and 3 for the 2-hour zones? And so I just felt like we needed to loop back to that, even though we talked about it some. I was like, well, I'm not 100% sure if that's really what we had decided. So, and honestly, I'm, part of me is like, well, if there's a reason based on usage to have them different, that's fine. But then there's another part that's like, well, but wouldn't it be nice if all the rules were all the same everywhere, and so then there's not confusion? So I'd like to know what you guys think.
Mhm.
Rob, do you have some thoughts?
I mean, so practically to do the 24/7, that means that the parking controller staggers their work shifts a little bit.
I think it probably would, I mean, again, this is ultimately the chief's call and something I have to talk more with him about, but I guess what I would envision would be like, every once in a while, they would do like a different shift than their usual work time, just enough enforcement so that people don't feel they can get away with breaking the rules.
Okay, so we could do it easily in all three zones if that's our policy choice.
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean,
Well, so I think the reason that we were proposing that is that we were discussing one of the questions that had come up at council, which was, why do we want to have this overnight parking permitting program for the streets that don't have an existing 2-hour zone parking permit? And, we talked about the different concerns that we were addressing with that, things like people using the street for long-term car storage, or coming from out of the borough and parking here, or just not, just choosing not to use a driveway or whatever. And I think our feeling was, well, we could address those concerns in some places if we just increase the enforcement hour in the 2 places where there are 2-hour zones.
mhm.
And that was why we wanted to do that. So I guess it doesn't seem to me like those concerns that we were hoping to address only exist in neighborhood 2.
Yeah, I guess my recollection of the conversation is that we were all comfortable with the 24/7 in all the existing 2-hour regulated parking areas.
Well,
I also would like to suggest gently that we unhook our concerns about enforcement from the policy discussion.
Mhm.
Because I don't think it serves anyone. It doesn't serve us in thinking about policy to be concerned about enforcement. I mean, there's a lot of, there's a law against spitting, right? But we don't on the sidewalk, but we don't worry about like enforcing spitting ordinance, But I think,
Yeah, that's fine.
look, 98%, 99% of people are law abiding and follow the rules. I don't think we have to worry about enforcement within this conversation.
Okay.
I would agree, but I also think we need to be mindful of it, because I'm sure that question will come up from council members, in the sense that they may be concerned that, we're looking to have, 3 parking controllers or something.
Well, I would say the same
And
to
that's-
them. I would say to them,
Right.
that's not our decision. It's about policy. We have a staff and that it can be concerned about how to implement enforcement according to the budgets and their.
Exactly. So in other words, we're not coming to them with here's a policy recommendation that then requires you to spend a lot of money that you maybe
Well,
don't.
I think it's overthinking it
Hmm.
to go there.
I guess what I'll say
That
is,
question.
if you had, as I think you've already seen on this issue already and other issues in the borough, if you have a policy recommendation that me or Michelle think is going to cause a major implementation problem, then we'll definitely bring
Yeah.
it to your attention.
Mhm.
But I would say, unless you hear something from me or Michelle about it, then you'll find to proceed
Thank you.
wherever you're.
Yeah, I'm not concerned that we won't get pushed back. If we come up with a policy notion that's going to be impossible for someone to enforce.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We'll get that. I don't think we have to overthink it. There's too many permutations of reality for us to do that. Let's just decide if we want to regulate overnight parking within the 2-hour zone.
Right. And I wasn't saying that we needed to take that enforcement issue into account. I'm just saying it is good that we addressed it so that council knows that
Okay.
we're not with blinders on saying,
Well, I think we can also say to council, we don't believe
Right.
it's in our interest to think about how this happens. Let's let the staff advise us.
Unless staff has said, well, that's ridiculously expensive. I mean, I think that's the thing that I think we need to let council know.
Okay, to move on.
That we, yeah, consider that. So, and the other thing we said about enforcement is that, you know, residents can certainly report, there's a car that's been sitting here, you know, for 5 days and
Mhm.
I don't recognize it. I don't, none of my neighbors do. Can you investigate it? Which, you know, I mean, that's-
Yeah, and I have no doubt that will happen.
Exactly, because that has happened on my block and we don't have any 2-hour regulations, but we have uncovered cars that were, you know, dumped at the end of our street. So it hasn't happened in a couple of years, but that's happening regularly for a while. It's weird. Not sure who was dumping them.
So what have we decided, that we're gonna do this in all 3 areas?
Yes, so it would be a borough-wide, it would be a change borough-wide to the enforcement hours in the 2-hour zones.
Okay.
And so what this would mean is that, you know,
Can we say in all 3 areas, in all 3 neighborhoods?
yes, so, well, yeah.
For the minutes, or should I say 2-hour zones in the areas?
Yeah, it's all 2-hour zones in the borough. We'll have their enforcement hours changed to 24/7. And that was the one other thing I wanted to check too. We really want to do this on Saturday and Sunday as well. I mean, I think the enforcement hours, the existing enforcement hours for the 2-hour zones vary depending on where you are. If you look in the ordinance, the time, some of them have times in them and some don't. You know, it's like kind of, so it's like, I suspect it's based on, you know, just when a new 2-hour zone was added, whether they thought to put in hours or not. But I don't think any of them contemplate 7-day-a-week enforcement. I'm not 100% sure.
So you think there might be a signage?
Oh, there's definitely going to be a signage issue. We're going to need new signs for sure. But I guess I'm just saying, do we really want this to be 7 days a week? I just want to make sure we're, that when we say 24/7, we really mean that, and not just, you know, 24 hours a day, Monday through Friday, which, you know, starts to get a little hard to parse out.
I mean, again, from an administrative standpoint, there's not really an issue whether it's 24/5 or 6 or
Yeah.
7. It's all kind of the same difference. I guess it just really is more of
Yeah.
a policy question for you all.
I think what we're making it impossible for guests to get permits,
Yeah.
for, you know, for long-term permits or short-term permits, for 2-hour permits. I think, sure, like, why not just keep it in effect all the time?
Okay.
And, you know, I know there's gonna be people that say, well, look, weekends,
Yeah.
it's like, well, you go online, you get a permit, you go on your smartphone, you get a permit. You know, it's like, this isn't just about now, this is about the future.
Yeah.
And future residents who move here won't blink twice at it. It's like, this is the way the world works.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah. Okay, so I think we have, and I think with this change, we'll also get a sense of the effect of having a permit to park overnight. Does that ease some of these other concerns that aren't addressed by a 2-hour parking permit? And then, you know, a future council could decide if they wanted to have something more comprehensive.
Sorry, I'm not following the clock.
So by changing the enforcement hours, we've in effect put in an overnight parking permit program where we have the existing 2-hour zones. And that'll give us some data about whether that eases some of the concerns, like people coming from outside the borough to park their cars here to go away on vacation, or some other things, at least in those areas.
I don't see how we get data on that, but
Well, it may be
People won't do it anymore, but the point is if someone expresses concern about, oh, my child comes in from college with their car, they get an overnight permit.
I know.
There's no problem parking.
I know that. I know.
Okay.
I understand that. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Anyway, I just think it's a start towards that maybe someday if we feel we need to have, if there's future council feels there's a need to regulate more streets or even regulate the whole borough, it gives you, a way to do something to think about. So anyway. And so that would mean then that, I think, this would mean that we would no longer recommend that there be an overnight parking permit program for any of the streets that currently are unregulated. And at our last meeting, we talked about that we would need to come up with a process for residents to apply for a new 2-hour zone if they felt, oh, you know what, our streets got issues. And the Nelson Nygaard report has a recommendation for that.
They have a process.
Yeah, they have a process that they recommend. I don't know that there's any reason for us to try to develop something other than that. Just realized that we have to put a flag on it.
I think we talked last time.
There it is.
Like just whether we were gonna have a kind of formalized.
Well, and so they recommended that, and this is what they recommended, that at least 60% of residents on the block must sign a petition to have their street regulated. Parking utilization must be greater than 60% during the residential peak hour to indicate a need for reform. So I'm like, okay, so how do you get that data? You have to do a parking study to get that data?
Yeah. I think our traffic engineer should be capable of doing that.
Okay. And then it says the entire street must be surveyed and driveway and parking zones marked with signage and paint to ensure effective operations that prevent burden on driveway users. And then, what they mean by an initial permit fee will be instituted for those purchasing on-street permits. Well, there's a fee for having a permit, so I don't know if they're saying you should maybe charge them for.
Which page of the Nelson Nygaard is that?
Page 28 and 29. And I don't know that we need to decide this right now, but I like their saying that, 60% of the residents must sign a petition. I mean, you could argue that you want it to be a higher
I
percentage, but
suggest that if there's something to decide, let's decide, and if there's nothing to decide, let's just move on.
well, I'm asking if the
Okay.
committee feels there's something to decide there, if there's
Well, either,
if we'd like to accept what Nelson Nygaard said, or if we'd like to,
okay, I'd like us to implement, let's formalize that. That's what I think we should decide to do, is make that the process by which a new neighborhood would petition for 2-hour or regulated.
and my question was, are you comfortable with the 60% that Nelson
Yes, I'm
Nygaard
comfortable
suggested?
with that.
Rob, are you comfortable?
Yeah, I think we did something similar for the new traffic.
Okay. Thank you, that's what I was.
And also, how would any one of us come up with another number? Nelson Nygaard's the parking expert.
I
I'm not sure.
am aware of that, Bob. I'm
Okay.
just asking if anybody has any concerns with that, because this has not been considered by, a group of council that might be taking action or making recommendations. So I just,
We are the group.
I know. So that's why I'm asking the question. I wasn't saying that the 60% was wrong. I was asking if we were comfortable with it. That's it. So I guess what I would then say is, if the staff could look at this and make sure that they don't see anything in here that they have any issues with, or is there something that they're saying should be part of the process that's like, well, no, that's not really, that's just incidental to how operations should work for parking. It doesn't have to be included in
Yeah, I would,
It's, you don't have to answer right now. So.
no, I think I can answer it
Okay.
now. Yeah, I think those first 4 bullet points, well, the first 3 bullet points, I think are what we should adopt.
Mhm.
And then I think, everything beyond that, we've already covered, just be the same as any other,
That's-
situation
yeah.
for regulated parking.
That's what I was thinking, that they're just really hammering home some things that we should be doing that we maybe weren't. Okay. That sounds good. Okay. So the next thing to consider, and I'm just kind of going down through the list of things that were put together, questions that were raised by council. Should the base rate for a parking permit be lower than what we had proposed originally, which, just to refresh everybody's memory, our base rate was $50, and that assumes you have a driveway. So for your first permit, you pay $50. For your second permit, you pay $50. For your third, you pay $100. And for your fourth, you pay $200. If you don't have a driveway, your first permit would be $25. And there was concern that that was too high, especially given that we were in our proposal, even higher than Philadelphia, and certainly higher than Lower Merion. Philadelphia charges $35 for the first permit and $50 for the second. Lower Merion charges $20 for the first and second permit. We can't get any more past that. So I wanted to see if the committee wanted to consider a change in that. Really, to me, this is really a council decision anyway, but I wanted to see if the committee wanted to make a different recommendation to council.
These fees are based on the covering of expenses. So if we reduce any of those, do we still cover the expenses?
So in this case, I'll say this, I guess it depends in this case, what you mean, how we define the word expenses. So if you're talking about just the cost to issue and enforce the program, it doesn't really matter whether one person has like 1 car, 2 cars, or 3 cars. So I think yes, I would even say these numbers probably won't even cover the expenses of doing it when you factor in the overhead and all that kind of thing involved in it. I guess this is a policy question, so it's not really my business, but my understanding of the to be real, because it's in the Nelson Nygaard report, the real reason for doing this graduated rate scale is to discourage people from getting multiple parking permits. And I guess my concern, which I'm willing to share with council as well, even though this is a policy thing, is if you reduce that number, then you're almost kind of defeating the point of why you have this graduated rate scale. So
That's kind of why I wanted to get that information. Since we're not necessarily covering the expenses, I'm comfortable with those values. I think that part of the reason for the graduated, the more for the third and fourth cars, because it's about equity for neighbors who also share that parking. If you have 1 car and your neighbors have 3, and they're using the spots in front of your houses, well, it should cost them more because they're getting something for it. So, but I'm comfortable with those values.
Okay.
That we already discussed and that we agreed upon earlier.
Just wanted to make sure, because I think when council talks about this again, that there will be, this will just be another time, it'll come up again.
And hopefully they'll agree with our recommendation.
Well, so I think there are 2.
try to convince one other person.
Yeah, right. I think there are 2 concerns. One is, this is way higher than even Philadelphia. And so there's this question of, do we care how we compare to other municipalities? And I'm like, well, but we're not Philadelphia, so yeah, I do, I don't care really, in some ways, and yet I don't want us to, be like, I want us to have a reason for why we might have the rates we have, and I think we have a good reason for that. The other is just a concern that, well, is $50 a lot of money for someone for a permit? And I guess I keep coming back to, if you have a car, you're already paying a lot to have a car. So.
Hey, it's less than a tank of gas.
I know, right now. And so I realized, oh wait, there's a third thing that I wanted to bring up, which is, are we creating some inequities and requiring, because we're going to be requiring these people to pay that fee, and some of them are going to live, right around the corner from somebody who doesn't have to pay it because they're not on a regulated street. And is that,
But they also don't have to buy a permit. They can park on a non-regulated street.
Exactly.
So-
And if
so
they
it's
have a
not-
driveway, they can park.
No one's twisting your arm to buy a parking permit.
Right.
It's a service to someone who wants to park near their home, who owns a home without a parking space. And those homes, theoretically, you're paying less for a home without a parking space. There's a market-driven reality.
Yeah. I think the
Just
one,
like you wouldn't buy a home in Narberth if you wanted to park 4 vehicles.
yes, well, one would hope anyway.
Well, you wouldn't have that expectation,
Well, there are some people living here who've lived here for a long time who have that expectation they should be able to do that, because that's what they've done for decades, Bob. That's just that's the nature of humanity. So I think the one thing that we'll want to keep in mind about this when we start talking about commercial parking is places where there might now be some competition between commercial uses and residents for parking. I'm thinking, especially close to the Montgomery Avenue business section. I think there's some places in there where there's some real pinch points, and I'm not sure, but I think most of those are caused by past decisions to give businesses residential permits. And, they're not really residential, but they kind of act that way. And so we may need to change that policy. And that might, because that might ease some of this concern that, yes.
On the
Sure.
administrative level, I welcome Michelle's thoughts as well on this, but, the limited experience I've had with that, I feel like it's a nightmare to enforce. I've only ever had to deal with it like twice in my time working here, but the challenges I've seen, and Michelle, please feel free to add on, is, there's this thing about depending on how much business friends you have, that's how many permits you get. And, for the staff to calculate that is near impossible. And then how do you deal with a situation where a single building has multiple businesses renting space in it? How do you decide who does it? Like, what if all the permits are used up at that point? And then you get into an issue of, okay, well, if we give these people a permit, their business has a certain frontage on a residential area that might be very limited, may interfere with residential needs.
I agree entirely, as well as there's a lot of turnover sometimes with these businesses. So they're constantly applying and getting rid of them, which may not be an issue with our new system, but it has been an issue in the past.
Is there more than just the one at North Narberth and Salem Avenue?
There are quite a few businesses
Yeah.
on to our zones.
That apply for permits? I would favor just doing away with allowing for those permits entirely, because there's plenty of parking in the borough. And I know that when I drove to work in the city and I didn't have a residential permit, I either paid for parking so I could walk to my office, or I would park in a neighborhood that was unregulated and walk 5 or 6 blocks to my office. That's life. That's the real world. Like,
Yeah.
you're going to work. I mean, you park where you can park.
But what did you suggest? Do away with the business?
Just do away with the commercial parking permit entirely. And let people, there's plenty, because, and it's because there's plenty of parking in the borough. There's plenty of places you can park your car for free in this borough. Thousands of spaces are available. It's not like the city of Philadelphia, and even in the city of Philadelphia, you would have the expectation you're gonna walk to work.
Yeah.
From wherever you park.
You'll find a space, it just,
Or you're gonna pay
Yeah.
$20 a day.
no, now it's like 40, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. I don't know, it's just, it's a relic of sort of a time before. I think it's a relic from a time when we considered parking and automobile efficient, like a convenience to be the ultimate value.
Yes,
And I don't think we live in those times anymore. I think we can consider pedestrian safety and,
mhm,
yeah, that we have other values as a community now.
I agree. And, I think when we.
This is good, but I think we have some good answers. You know, we can
Yes.
already anticipate what some of our council colleagues will say.
Yeah.
And I think there's some answers now. You know,
And
for
Samantha
example-
said we only need one, so.
Right, we don't have to convince everyone.
Right, exactly.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, that was the point of the joke, so.
It was a joke, I'm making a joke.
No, that was good, Bob.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we may, when we talk about this just a little bit further, when we get to just all the commercial issues, you know, we may want to think, you know, consider, are there any, what will the ramifications be for some of the near neighborhoods to these commercial?
Mhm.
I'm thinking especially,
Well, I don't know.
and I'm thinking, yes, and I'm thinking especially of that auto body shop.
Yes,
I'm like, where are they, are they going to be now parking junk-looking cars on non-regulated streets?
if we did this, they would have to pay for off-site storage,
That's
which
what-
they're not,
that-
it seems.
That's
They
that's
already do.
Do they?
Yeah, they do,
They
yeah.
do? Okay.
maybe not enough, because I certainly see a lot of
Isn't
junk
that
cars.
their problem?
Oh, no, I know, I'm just saying, maybe not enough, because I do see a number of junky-looking cars that have been, it's clear they've been sitting there for a while because they're, you know, there's brush wedged underneath the tires, or there's a lot of dust on the car. So it's waiting for, I don't know, maybe insurance claim to come through, for the work to be done or whatever. And I'm like, that car shouldn't be on the street, I don't think, but anyway. So I'm just saying that there may be some ramifications of this that we'll need to consider how that gets.
When we say do away with commercial parking, does that mean their downtown business?
Well-
Is that part of that?
They don't have anything anyway.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think.
But what ramification do you want to?
Just make sure that we know that we have a solution, or that we say, hey, you know, you're gonna have to find a solution to this problem now.
Well, I'm
Why
looking,
do we need to do that? No, not really. No, I'm not. I'm asking you, what are you feeling is our obligation?
Well, there are businesses in Narberth. I think, you know, we would like to show that we're still value them as a business in Narberth, and that we're not, you know, singling them out in some way or whatever, but we're asking that
Well, right
they.
now they do use the 2-hour privilege. Right, so because we do have 2-hour parking in Harvard, so they can put a car
Yes,
out on the
for
street
2
for a couple of hours.
Yep.
And I believe that's what they're currently doing. I don't think we've given them any extra permits.
Yes, we have.
They
yeah,
have
that's
extra-
exactly what we're talking about.
So they can move those permits around from vehicle to vehicle? Are you just talking about employees?
No, I don't think.
I mean, are they something, I mean, we can give them hand tags or something that they're moving from vehicle to vehicle.
So what, I mean,
So how does it work?
sorry, so what happens right now, I mean, our ordinance allows any business that has frontage on a 2-hour zone is allowed to apply for a 2-hour permit, just like a borough resident. And that's what it
It's
is.
So
not
every time they get a
specific
car in their
vehicle.
shop, they're not applying for a new 2-hour permit for that car that they have in their shop.
Oh, you're talking about the auto body
Yeah,
shop.
this is what
Oh,
Barbara's
sorry.
expressing concern about.
Oh, I don't know what the auto body
About
shop
the
does.
body shop's issues. I don't.
All right.
I'm just trying to follow you, what it is that we need to, I don't want to let these conversations linger more than just today. Let's nail this down. Let's finish some of these things. That's what I'm suggesting.
Okay.
So you're saying, let's marinate more on this thing. And I'm saying, what is it that we're marinating on?
No.
And can we make a decision?
Okay.
Okay.
I guess here, so Bob, my thought for today, and maybe we want to change that.
Okay.
But my thought for today was that we would get through all of the questions raised by council regarding residential parking.
Okay.
We veered a little into commercial parking, and all I was saying is maybe we consider talking, that we wait to talk about commercial parking as a whole, because there's more than just the issues over, in the.
Okay, I didn't hear you say that till now.
Well, I
I'm
did,
fine with that.
and
Let's wait on
I'm
that.
sorry, I should have said that. I thought the conversation might just.
I thought you were suggesting there's something we need to figure out on behalf of the body shop,
Well,
so that they feel that they're a valued business, and I just was like, well, okay, what am I thinking about? Like, how are they using the on-street parking? I couldn't understand.
I'm thinking more about commercial in general, and whatever we change, we want to make sure we don't want the businesses to feel like we're just trying to, make their lives miserable. So we need to just keep that in mind.
So, that's fine, but are you saying that we're now tabling the conversation and the decisions we made about commercial parking? Are you saying, because I thought we just decided to do away with commercial parking.
I do too, and I'm going to include that in my, I have a section in the questions that are upcoming for us.
So when we come back to
Putting that in
it,
there.
when we come
Yes.
back to it, can you just make a note that we already made a recommendation that we eliminate commercial parking?
That's my note. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. I do feel as though we are letting some of these things sit on the stove too long. And I guess I'd like to see us move them through. Like some things, I feel like we're continuing to recycle. I know we're revisiting council concerns,
Yes.
but remember that when we're revisiting a council concern, we've already made a recommendation. So let's just.
I know that,
Okay.
that's why I'm asking.
Not rather than to question our recommendation.
My question is just, do we want to change anything? And we ended up changing something regarding the overnight parking permit. So you have to recognize, I think we need to have those conversations.
Okay.
I realize it's tedious, but I think we have to have.
It is genius.
Yes. All right. So so the last decision we made regarding residential parking was that we don't want to lower the base rate. We were comfortable all along with the graduated rate. All right. So one thing that came up at council was, what do we mean when we say you have a driveway? What about shared driveways? What about really narrow driveways that you can't park a car in? I think what we talked about is, hey, if somebody says, I don't have a driveway, we're just going to believe them. And if somebody then comes and says, oh, yes, you do, then there could be that somebody reports them. And so if somebody has a driveway that was built for a Model T car and you can't get anything in it but a Model T car, they're going to say, no, I don't have a driveway. And if somebody has a shared driveway that is so narrow that only one of the households can use it, the other one can say, I don't have a driveway. And nobody's going to be going out and saying, look, you've got a driveway there.
Agreed. And if somebody does go out, we're not such a big institution, we're not such a big formal place that somebody with a reasonable conscience will go out and say, like, make a decision, it's fair. I mean, that's what our staff are very reasonable.
Right, and that's what I wanted to, that's how I felt. Where we came to that conclusion was that we weren't going to get hung up on a definition of driveway.
I guess I was trying to say, we're not such an enormous bureaucracy that we can't be particular and caring about each individual resident.
Right, exactly. Another question that was raised was, if you have no driveway at all, should we consider that your first permit is free instead of half of the base rate? Again, I think we've decided that we are comfortable with our structure.
$25 instead of 0.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, that's what we recommended, that's fine.
Yeah, but I just want to make sure we didn't have any. Because I don't think we considered that. I don't think we considered giving 10, but I recall.
You know, yeah, we just need for, I don't know how to say it, but the concerns we've heard from our colleague, Cindy, have to do with, you know, people with different incomes.
Yeah.
And, but, you know, this is what we decided, so.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
Carton, how much is a carton of cigarettes?
I don't know. They're not cheap.
No, like,
I mean, you know, for a drink, these days, it's $10
Yeah.
to buy a drink.
I know.
I mean,
Yeah.
You know, and like Bob says, there is an option, they could park further away.
Right,
And they may
exactly.
be older, and, you know, so there are all sorts
So they're
of.
not going to want to, but yeah, and that, you know, I keep coming back to we can't address every person's situation.
Mhm.
You know, there's just not a possibility.
I mean, it's the same situation, you know, with any other borough service we provide. I mean, for example, like the trash service, when I, you know, the borough has contracted trash, when I implemented contracted trash in my last job, I had people who are like, well, I don't have any trash, so why do I have to pay this? Or I throw my trash away at work, so why do I? So on the
Like your
opposite end of the
workplace
scale,
isn't gonna be happy.
I had people who were like, I'm, you know, like running a foster home and I have, you know, like I need like 6, you know, garbage containers, you know,
Mhm.
and again,
No.
you just can't make a policy that's accommodate every single individual concern.
The one last concern that I had here was that if we had some kind of permitting program that applied to the entire borough, we could have lower rates because we would have more people buying permits than what we're going to have if it's just the 2 hour zones. So there was at least one person who felt, no, this should be a borough-wide permitting. You know, every street should have regulations on it. I think, you know, that's, you know, we've talked about that a lot and decided that we didn't, you know, we're aware of the inequity in having some people pay and others not, but the people that are paying would be in areas where they petition to have some parking protection. So,
Right, and they could choose to undo that if they didn't pay the fees, right?
Right.
There is a process, do we have that codified?
we don't.
That's
but-
true. I would say, I think we should. I think it should almost be the opposite
Yeah.
of the process doing in that.
Yeah.
Again, still 60% of people have to say they want that change, but then the study would show, they'll have to show the opposite, like during the peak residential hour, that there's less than that amount of.
That would be very good, because then that would give the what and now.
Exactly.
And I mean, the other thing I think we would say to council members should say like, well, we should share the burden of the cost more borough-wide, is that, well, I think that's called taxes. And you know, we do tax every resident according to value of their property.
Mhm.
And if, you know, one option is to pay for the parking program through the general, probably, I don't know if you can do that. If there's another way to finance it.
Well, that's what we're already
Certainly, it's probably,
That's what we're
it's already doing. I mean, it probably is unconstitutional to add an extra fee on every household.
It would be, yeah. Well, it's not to be unconstitutional. It's that state borough code.
It would not be legal
Wouldn't be allowed.
to say like, okay, we're going to charge $25 parking fee to every home. That wouldn't be allowed. So the only other way to pay for the service that we're providing would be in the form of a tax hike. And so, I mean,
I think while it might be, you know, a laudable goal to have everyone paying something for parking, and we've talked about that a lot at the very beginning, you know, that parking it's a public good and it has a value that we're not capturing right now. To have that across the entire borough right now is, you know, maybe a little more than council is wanting to do at the moment.
well, they certainly didn't want to overnight parking.
Right, exactly. So I think we're, you know,
So what else would you be regulating with all borough-wide? permit?
exactly. So you know, Yeah, exactly. I know. So I think the answer is, hey, that's just not where council's at right now. There might be one or two individuals who want to do something like that, but I don't think the council as a whole. Okay.
So we decided to keep it to the residents.
Yes, we're not gonna, yes, there's this concern that, oh, we're not having everybody pay something, but again, we're still back to what our recommendation was. We're comfortable with that. Okay. So the next thing that I would say is to talk about guest passes. So one thing that came up in a conversation that I had with another council member is, why don't we give a hang tag to anybody who applies for a 2-hour permit and just allow them to use it for their guests? And I'm thinking, how
We
do
don't use hang tags.
well, yes, I know. They're thinking, wouldn't that be nice and easy? And I'm thinking, well, yeah, but then the question is, how do you make sure that that person isn't then using it for their own use instead of their guests? So I felt like that, but I wanted to make sure that you guys had the same kind of reaction that I did, which is, I think that allows a way to game the system.
The communities that used to do that, use them, I don't use to do it anymore. It's something that they did in Westchester. I'm not sure what Westchester does anymore, but it's not, I don't think it's hang tags anymore.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, yeah, it's more work for the staff to have to do it the way we do it, but I think there's a valid policy reason for why we do it this way,
Yeah.
which is what we just.
Yeah. I just don't see how you prevent the person from using it for their own personal harm.
Well, and why wouldn't that council member be okay with just going online and getting a temporary guest permit?
I think that it's just the ease, the convenience. If you've got a hang tag and somebody suddenly is staying, then it's easy. But I know not everybody has online access, but
We have the library.
almost,
We have options.
Exactly. Well, but if it's Saturday night,
Do you know anyone with a car who doesn't have a cell phone?
I know. I was just gonna say, it's getting way.
Yeah, this is a policy kind of thing, but just to reiterate what I think I said 2 or 3 weeks ago, like, if you're gonna put yourself in a situation where you're gonna have to figure out how to get home, you need to plan ahead, like you hopefully would in any other situation for that.
Right. So, yeah, so we have some other questions about guest passes that we haven't talked about yet. And one is, how often can they be renewed? Because right now they can be renewed indefinitely. And so it's like you basically have turned it into almost a residential permit. And
I mean, I would say if we have a fee,
yeah,
then that's an assault itself in
Okay.
terms of, and I don't think we need to put a limit on guest passes, just if we do have a fee. If we don't have a fee, then yes, then I would think we would need to put some kind of limit on how often you get them.
okay. And
But I would prefer the fee because that's going to be
Yep.
way easier to manage and deal with.
yep. And hopefully council will agree to having a fee because they didn't back in 2019. They decided to push that decision off to a later time. So hopefully that'll be now. So I think that so then the kind of like a similar question to that is that, do we want to limit the number of guest passes per residence? So like, do we want to say that a person can't apply for more than 3 or whatever, and then,
Again, I kind of default to if there's, as long as we set the fee appropriately, that's a problem that should take care of itself.
yeah.
Right
now, what we've proposed is $5 for a daily pass, $15 for a weekly pass. So, if you're having a big party, maybe you'd be willing to spend $5 for, 5 guest passes, I don't know. But
Or maybe your
Do-
guests will Uber over.
Right, exactly, so I'm like, do
Maybe
we
your
care?
guests will park 3 blocks away.
Exactly.
Exactly, so I'm like, so does this matter? So do we care if somebody wants to apply for 5 guest passes, we're fine with that, we don't care. Somebody wants to apply for 20, we're fine. Their neighbors won't like it if they take up all the spaces on the street. So I kind of feel like this is one of those where
But that would happen anyway when
Yeah.
someone has a party.
especially if you have an unregulated street, I mean, my block gets parked up a lot, from parties on my street. And it's like, okay, fine, and it's hard, it's a problem for my neighbors who don't have good driveway access, but we're not trying to say, don't have big parties, people. Okay, I just want to make sure we didn't want to do that.
So we've decided on the fees, right?
We,
5 and 15.
We decided on those quite a while ago, yeah. So now it's just like some little details around. So we're not gonna have a limit on the number of guest passes. We're not gonna have a limit on how many times you can renew either.
Okay.
We're we're assuming that the fee is going to nudge people in a direction where they're not gonna go overboard in what they're doing in applying for passes. Then one other question that had come up about guest passes is, should you be allowed, I think this is coming from, I think, someone who saw this happening. Should you be allowed to get a guest pass for a 2-hour zone if you don't live in that zone? Because I don't think right now, when somebody applies for a guest pass, do you ask them to prove that they live in that 2-hour zone? Absolutely. But I don't know that we ask that right
Well,
now.
guest pass.
Yes,
Sorry.
yeah, and anyone can apply online right now. It's really unregulated.
Right. So do we need the resident to be applying for the guest pass as opposed to the guest?
I would say that would be the
Yeah.
easiest way to verify.
Yeah,
Yeah, because
okay,
if they already applied for their own permit, then we had already verified their
Yeah.
information.
okay. So that would be a change to the application process. The resident needs to apply on behalf of the guest.
So just this is more of like a technical question. Would a person have to be in the system already with a permitted car in order to apply for a guest permit, or just,
So if we would require verification, then if they weren't already in the system, then we would require them to provide proof of residency.
okay,
Yeah,
got it.
And they can do that online, right? They can scan in their document. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So it's not like they have to come into the borough. I guess the only thing that I could see someone running up against is, I didn't know I was going to have a guest until Saturday at, 11 o'clock at night, and I sent my stuff in, but there's nobody in the office to process it. So then, and I think the answer to that is, well, if you get a ticket, you come in, there's a way to handle that, because you can see they applied for a guest pass, and just because of when the office is open, it didn't get entered into the system as that they have a pass.
yeah, and if we aren't approving them up front, if we're allowing them to go through and then auditing them, then if they apply for one, it'll be automatic.
I'm sorry, say that
The
again.
permit will be automatic if they apply for one online, if we're just auditing them rather than approving them.
Gotcha. So as long as they attach all the things you want, it'll get
It'll go
automatic.
through.
It'll go through, and then you audit it after. the
Audit
fact.
it. Mhm.
Perfect, all
Yeah.
right, so then that's not a problem.
Yeah.
Oh, love it, okay. That's great, all right. Okay,
So, again, like Bob said, we have this kind of off-ramp. So if
Yeah.
any of these
Mhm.
new policies are deemed onerous
Yep.
by residents,
Yep.
they can rally together and exit the program,
right, exactly,
right?
yes,
So
Yep.
that's,
exactly.
Well, then it comes back to the 60% issue. They don't have a choice, I guess, if their street has more than this kind of utilization. Could we just give residents of a block, never mind, I'm gonna be quiet. I don't think so.
I think, well, you
I
know,
don't think we can give them a choice because you could leave 40% of the people out in the lurch, like in the lurch, like
Exactly.
in an unregulated street.
mhm,
If like, for some reason you have.
Yeah.
I mean, look, there are people in the world who would like the street lamp in front of your home to be paid for by the resident. So, and that's, I don't think we want to go there.
yeah, I agree. All right. So we've reached our 9 o'clock time, and I can't tell, is there anybody from the public?
There's that.
Okay, I didn't think so, but I can see that from there. So, I will just, say that our next meeting is, June 28th. 24th here, and I'm working that, doesn't make any sense. It's June 28th, so 2 weeks. Thank you, everybody, for.
Yeah, I will be joining by Zoom on that.
Okay,
That's a Friday, right?
Thursday.
Thursday.
I mean, Tuesday. Why did I say Thursday? It's a Tuesday.
June 20th.
Today is the 14th, it's Tuesday.
I'm not available.
Oh, okay,
So, but please meet without me.
yeah.
I pretty much feel, I think you understand that.
Okay. Thanks, okay, thank you.